What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say small block Chevy? Reliable, cheap, everywhere. How about completely, utterly, ridiculously overpowered for what they are? Never thought about it that way? What if I told you that these humble hunks of iron have been punching way above their weight class for over 60 years, making power numbers that would make European engineers weep into their precision machined espresso cups? The small block Chevy has always fascinated me. I'm not entirely sure why, to be honest. Maybe because it's so deceptively simple, maybe because it's literally everywhere, or maybe because deep down I know it represents something profound about American engineering philosophy. You know, that whole there's no replacement for displacement mentality that makes German engineers break out in hives. So with that out of the way, let's talk about why these things are so absurdly overpowered. And I mean that literally. We're talking about an engine that started life making a modest 265 cubic inches and somehow evolved into a fire-breathing monster that can reliably pump out over 1,000 horsepower. From a design that's older than the Beatles. Think about that for a second. Now check this out. When Ed Cole and his team at Chevrolet sat down in 1954 to design what would become the small block, they weren't trying to create a legend. They were just trying to keep up with Oldsmobile and Cadillac, who were absolutely destroying them in the performance department. Chevy was the economy brand, the sensible choice, the automotive equivalent of oatmeal. Nutritious, reliable, boring as hell. The original 265 V8 that debuted in the 55 Chevy made 162 horsepower. Rookie numbers, right? Well, not really. For 1955, that was actually pretty respectable. But here's where things get interesting. That same basic architecture with some admittedly significant updates is still being used today. And modern versions are making over 600 horsepower naturally aspirated. That's almost 4 times the original output from essentially the same design. You're probably thinking, well, yeah, technology improved. Of course, they make more power now. But that's not the whole story, not even close. The real magic of the small block isn't just that it makes power, it's how stupidly easy it is to make even more power. Essentially, these engines are overbuilt from the factory in ways that nobody really appreciated until the hot rodders got their hands on them. Let me paint you a picture. It's 1957, and some kid in California decides his 283 small block needs more oomph. So he bolts on a 4-barrel carburetor, maybe adds some headers, and suddenly he's making 300 horsepower. Meanwhile, Ferrari is using dual overhead cams and multiple carburetors to barely squeeze out similar numbers from their exotic V12s. The Italians are creating mechanical symphonies, while Americans are basically hitting engine blocks with bigger hammers. And it works. The fact is, the small block's architecture is accidentally brilliant. The bore spacing, which is the distance between cylinder centers, is 4.4 inches. That number might not mean anything to you, but to engine builders, it's basically perfect. It allows for huge bore sizes while maintaining good cylinder wall thickness. You can punch these things out to 4.25 inches without breaking a sweat. Try that with a Honda B Series and watch it turn into expensive confetti. Furthermore, the deck height, which determines how tall the engine block is, gives you tons of room for stroke increases. The factory blocks can easily handle stroker cranks that bump displacement up to 427 cubic inches. That's a 60% increase in displacement using the stock block. It's insane. You're basically turning a small block into a big block while keeping all the packaging advantages. But wait, there's more. The cylinder heads on these things flow air like nobody's business. Even the terrible smog-era heads from the 70s can be made to support 500 horsepower with some port work. The aftermarket heads, forget about it. We're talking about flow numbers that would have been considered impossible when the engine was designed. Airflow wins races, as they say. And small blocks move air like they're getting paid by the cubic foot. Speaking of which, let's talk about the aftermarket for a second. This is where things get truly ridiculous. You can build an entire small block Chevy without using a single GM part. Block, crank, rods, pistons, heads, intake, everything. There are probably more companies making small block parts than there are making parts for every other engine combined. It's like the AR-15 of the automotive world. Infinitely customizable, stupidly simple, and way more powerful than it has any right to be. The economics of this are mind-blowing. You can pick up a used small block for literally a few $100. Throw another 1,000 at it for basic performance parts, and you got 350 horsepower. Reliable horsepower, daily driver horsepower. Try getting those numbers from any other platform for that kind of money. Go ahead, I'll wait. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good DOHC 4-cylinder screamer as much as the next guy. There's something beautiful about an engine that makes power through precision and high RPM. But there's also something deeply satisfying about an engine that makes power through sheer brute force and bloody-minded determination. It's the engineering equivalent of solving a math problem by punching it repeatedly until it gives you the answer you want. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The LS series, which is essentially the small block's evolution, took everything that made the original great and turned it up to 11. Aluminum blocks, better heads, fuel injection, and somehow they made it even more overbuilt. These things are making 800 horsepower on stock bottom ends. Stock bottom ends. That's not supposed to be possible. I mean, come on, when was the last time you heard about someone grenading an LS engine? They're basically indestructible. You can boost them, nitrous them, rev them to the moon, and they just keep asking for more. It's like they're personally offended by the concept of mechanical limits. The tuning community has essentially turned breaking LS engines into a competitive sport, and the engines are winning. What they didn't know, however, back in the 50s, was that they were creating something that would fundamentally change motorsports. NASCAR, drag racing, road racing, drifting, autocross, literally every form of motorsport has been dominated at some point by small block Chevys. It's gotten to the point where some racing series have had to specifically ban them just to give other engines a chance. That's not dominance, that's humiliation. The horsepower wars of the 60s and early 70s really showed what these engines could do. The L88 427, which was technically a big block but used small block architecture principles, was rated at 430 horsepower. Everyone knew that was nonsense. Real output was closer to 550. Chevrolet was literally lying about how much power their engines made so they could keep racing them, and insurance companies wouldn't freak out. Imagine that conversation. How much power does it make? Oh, about 430. Really? Would we lie to you? Narrator, they would in fact lie to you. But perhaps unsurprisingly, it's not just about raw power. These engines are also stupidly efficient when built right. I've seen 400 cubic inch small blocks getting 25 miles per gallon on the highway while making 500 horsepower. That's better fuel economy than a modern V6 Camry with literally double the power. How does that even make sense? It doesn't. That's the point. The packaging is another area where these engines absolutely demolish the competition. A small block Chevy is tiny for what it is. You can stuff one into basically anything. Mazda Miata? Done. Porsche 911? Why not? Your grandmother's sewing machine? Probably, if you're creative enough. The compactness relative to power output is genuinely impressive. Ferrari needs 4 cams and 48 valves to make the power a small block makes, with pushrods and 16 valves. Incidentally, let's talk about pushrods for a minute. Everyone loves to crap on pushrod engines as being old tech, outdated, agricultural. Yeah, well, this agricultural technology is making 200 horsepower per liter, naturally aspirated in some builds. That's hypercar territory. McLaren F1 territory. Except instead of requiring a team of specialists and exotic materials, you can build it in your garage with hand tools and determination. The camshaft thing's particularly hilarious to me. One cam in the block operating all 16 valves through push rods and rockers. It's so simple, it's almost stupid. Meanwhile, modern engines have variable valve timing, variable lift, cylinder deactivation, and 17 computers managing everything. Small block, mechanical lifters and springs, that's it. And somehow it works just as well, if not better. Furthermore, the sound, oh my God, the sound. A properly cammed small block at full throttle is basically the mechanical equivalent of freedom itself. It's the sound of bald eagles crying tears of joy while fighter jets do barrel rolls overhead. It's aggression and beauty and violence all wrapped up in cast iron and aluminum. No amount of computer-controlled exhaust valves can replicate that purely mechanical symphony of barely controlled explosions. The rebuild simplicity is another massive advantage. You can rebuild a small block in your driveway with basic tools. The parts are everywhere. The knowledge is everywhere, and if you screw up, parts are cheap enough that it's not the end of the world. Try that with a modern twin-turbo V6. You'll need a second mortgage just for the special tools. This created a situation where literally millions of people learned to work on engines using small blocks. It's like the educational foundation of American hot rodding. Every grandfather has a story about the small block they built. Every car guy over 40 has owned at least one. It's not just an engine, it's a shared cultural experience. That's powerful stuff. The racing heritage is absolutely insane when you really dig into it. Let me blow your mind real quick. Small block Chevys have won Indianapolis 500s, 24 hours of Daytona, 24 hours of Le Mans, NASCAR championships, NHRA championships, Formula 5000 championships, Trans Am championships, and probably your local dirt track championship last weekend. Name another engine with that kind of range, you can't. During this period of absolute dominance, other manufacturers were frantically trying to keep up. Ford created the Windsor, which was good, but not quite there. Chrysler had the LA series, again, good but missing something. Everyone was chasing the small blocks combination of simplicity, power potential, and reliability. Most fell short, some fell spectacularly short. The modularity is something else that makes these engines incredibly overpowered for their era. You can mix and match parts from different years and displacements like Lego blocks. Heads from a 96 Vortec on a 72 400 block with a crank from an 86 350? Sure, why not? It'll probably make more power than any of those engines did stock. This part's bin engineering approach means you can build exactly the engine you want without breaking the bank. And additionally, the thermal efficiency of these things when built right is remarkable. The combustion chamber design, especially on the later Vortec and LS heads, is genuinely excellent. Fast burn, good quench, minimal hot spots. You can run 11-to-1 compression on pumped gas without detonation. That was fantasy land stuff when the engine was designed. Let that sink in. An engine architecture from the 50s is running compression ratios that modern engines with all their fancy engine management can barely handle. And it's doing it with a carburetor and a distributor if you want. No knock sensors, no variable timing, just good old-fashioned mechanical excellence. But here's where things get properly mental. The forced induction potential of small blocks is absolutely ridiculous. These things love boost like fish love water. 6 pounds of boost on a mild 350, 450 horsepower easy. Twin turbos on a 427, 1500 horsepower if you're conservative. 2,000 if you're brave, 2,500 if you're insane. And the blocks handle it. The LSX block, which is admittedly an aftermarket piece, but still small block architecture, can handle over 3,000 horsepower. 3,000. From an engine design that started when Eisenhower was president. That's not evolution, that's sorcery. Modern Formula One engines don't make that much power. Top fuel engines barely last 4 seconds. LSX motors are doing it for entire racing seasons. Now is a good time to mention the weight or lack thereof. An aluminum LS engine weighs about the same as a Honda K-Series 4-cylinder, but it makes 3 times the power and twice the torque. The power-to-weight ratio is genuinely shocking. It's like everything else in America. We supersized the power, but forgot to supersize the weight penalty. You guys have to understand, this isn't supposed to be possible. Engines are supposed to be compromises. You want power? Sacrifice reliability. You want reliability? Sacrifice economy. You want economy? Sacrifice power. Small blocks looked at this conventional wisdom and said, nah, we're good. They do everything well enough that they're the answer to almost every automotive question. What engine should I put in my project car? Small block. What engine should I use for my boat? Small block. What engine should power my apocalypse survival vehicle? Small block. What engine should... Small block. The answer is always small block. The fact that you can walk into any auto parts store in America and buy performance parts for a small block off the shelf is insane. Try finding performance parts for a Mercedes and M119 at AutoZone. Good luck with that. But a high performance intake manifold for a small block? Aisle 7, 3 different brands. Would you like the polished or natural finish? This Ubiquity has created an ecosystem where innovation happens at breakneck speed. Someone figures out a new porting technique, and within months, everyone knows about it. Someone develops a new cam profile, and suddenly everyone's running it. The collective knowledge base around these engines is probably larger than NASA's database, and it's all freely shared because everyone wants to go faster. Interestingly, the small block has become so overpowered that it's actually killed innovation in some ways. Why develop a new engine when you can just throw an LS in it? Why spend millions on R&D when a crate engine from Chevrolet Performance will destroy anything you could develop? It's simultaneously the best and worst thing to happen to hot rodding. The international respect these engines get is telling. Japanese drifters import them. Australian burnout competitors swear by them. European hot rodders dream about them when the entire world agrees that your Pushrod V8 from the 50s is still the best solution. You've won. Game over. Everyone else can go home, but more on that in a bit. Let's talk about specific builds that showcase just how overpowered these things really are. There's a guy on YouTube who put a mild 383 stroker in a Prius. It makes 400 horsepower and gets 30 miles per gallon. A Prius, the car that's supposed to represent everything opposite of what a small block stands for, and someone stuffed one in there just because they could. The Turbo LS swapped everything movement is particularly hilarious. People are putting 1,000 horsepower Turbo LS engines in the first-gen Mazda Miatas. That's a 2,000-pound car with 4-digit horsepower. The power-to-weight ratio is better than a Bugatti Veyron. For the price of a nice used Accord, this shouldn't be legal. Actually, in some places, it isn't. Street racing culture has been completely transformed by accessible small block power. When you can build a 1,000 horsepower street car for 20 grand, the whole game changes. Supercars become irrelevant. Why spend $500,000 on a Lamborghini when some dude in a Fox body Mustang with an LS swap will absolutely destroy you at a stoplight? And then drive home getting decent gas mileage. This democratization of speed is genuinely revolutionary. Performance is no longer the exclusive domain of the wealthy. Any working class person with some mechanical aptitude and determination can build something that would embarrass exotic cars. That's the American dream right there. Except instead of home ownership, it's tire shredding horsepower. The engine's influence on other manufacturers has been profound. Everyone's trying to capture that small block magic. Ford's Coyote V8 is essentially their attempt to out-de-small block the small block. It's more complex, makes similar power, but costs more and is harder to modify. They played themselves. Chrysler's modern Hemi is the same story. More complexity for minimal benefit. Meanwhile, at the same time, GM just keeps refining the same basic formula. The new LT engines are small blocks with direct injection and variable valve timing. But strip away the technology and it's still the same architecture. Ed Cole sketched out in '54. If it ain't broke, make it make more power. That seems to be the philosophy. The grassroots racing impact cannot be overstated. Every weekend at every drag strip and circle track in America, small blocks are competing. They're affordable enough that regular people can go racing. This has created a massive industry around making these engines even more overpowered. It's a beautiful feedback loop of speed addiction. One can only imagine what Ed Cole would think if he saw what his simple V8 has become. Probably equal parts pride and horror. We just wanted to compete with Oldsmobile, he might say, watching someone pull 2,000 horsepower from his design. The law of unintended consequences in action. Create a decent V8, accidentally enable 60 years of automotive mayhem. The technical colleges all teach students using small blocks because they're perfect teaching tools. Simple enough to understand, complex enough to be interesting, And when you're done learning, you have a marketable skill. There are probably more small block engine builders than there are software developers. Okay, that's hyperbole, but you get the point. Professional engine builders have turned small block building into an art form. Guys like Steve Morris, Nelson Racing Engines, and Texas Speed are creating engines that make Formula One teams look like amateurs. And they're doing it with Pushrod V8s. The sophistication hidden in the simplicity is genuinely remarkable. These aren't just engines. They're mechanical sculptures that happen to make violence. The weird thing is, small blocks keep getting better. You'd think we'd have hit the limits by now. Nope. Every year, someone figures out how to make more power, make it more reliable, make it more efficient. It's like the engine equivalent of compound interest. Continuous improvement over decades leads to shocking results. So what gives? Why are these things so overpowered? The answer is surprisingly simple. They were overbuilt from day one, continuously refined for 60 years, and supported by the largest aftermarket in automotive history. It's evolution through capitalism. The free market decided small blocks should be overpowered, and by God, they delivered. The emissions thing's particularly funny. The EPA has tried everything to kill these engines. Catalytic converters, EGR, air pumps, computer controls. Small blocks shrugged and kept making power. Modern LS engines meet California emission standards while making 600 horsepower. It's like they're personally insulting the concept of environmental regulation. You want clean? Fine. We'll be clean. And faster. The military has used small blocks in various applications. When you need reliable power in harsh conditions, guess what they choose? Not some high-tech marvel. Nope. Pushrod V8s based on small block architecture. When the failure means death, you go with what works, and small blocks work. At this point, I should mention the elephant in the room, electric vehicles. Tesla fanboys love to point out how their electric motors make instant torque and embarrass gas engines. Yeah, well, a 2,000 horsepower twin-turbo LS makes instant torque too. It's called boost, and it doesn't need 800 pounds of batteries to do it. Plus, it sounds like Thor gargling thunder instead of a milk float. The cultural impact extends beyond cars. Small blocks have appeared in movies, songs, and literature. They're part of American mythology now. When someone says, drop a small block in it, everyone knows what that means. It means taking something modest and making it absolutely unreasonable. It's a metaphor for American excess, and I mean that in the best way possible. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more absurd it becomes. Imagine explaining to someone from the 50s that their new V8 would still be in production 70 years later, that it would eventually make 10 times its original power, that it would become the most successful engine architecture in history. They'd think you were insane, yet here we are. Perhaps if the accountants had known what they were creating, they would have charged more for it. The performance bargain that small blocks represent is genuinely unprecedented. Dollar for horsepower, nothing comes close. It's like GM accidentally created the automotive equivalent of the AK-47. Cheap, simple, reliable, effective, and absolutely everywhere. The irony is that GM has tried to kill the small block several times. The North Star V8 was supposed to replace it. Failed. The 3800 V6 was supposed to make V8s obsolete. Nope. Even the LS was supposed to be radically different. They ended up just refining the same formula. You can't kill something that works this well. To be fair, there are some downsides. Fuel economy can be terrible if you're heavy-footed. But who builds a 400 cubic inch stroker to hypermile? The packaging in modern cars is getting tighter, making swaps harder. But people keep finding ways. The pushrod design limits RPM, but when you make 800 pound-feet of torque, who needs RPM? Fast forward to today, and small blocks are still the default answer for anyone wanting big power. Electric might be the future, but small blocks are the eternal present. They exist outside of time, immune to progress, defying obsolescence through sheer stubborn excellence. It's beautiful in a completely unreasonable way. Sometimes the best ideas are the simple ones executed well. The small block Chevy is that principle taken to its logical extreme. It's not sophisticated, it's not exotic, It's not even particularly interesting from an engineering standpoint. It's just good. Really, really good. And then modified to be absolutely insane. History has a sense of humor about these things. Ferrari spends millions developing exotic engines that make 300 horsepower per liter. Some kid in Ohio bolts a turbo to a junkyard LS and makes the same power for the cost of a nice dinner. The Italians create art, Americans create horsepower. Both have their place, but one costs a lot less. Maybe that's the real tragedy here, or maybe it's the triumph. The small block has made exotic performance mundane. It's removed the mystery from speed. Anyone can have it. Anyone can build it. Anyone can experience it. It's the democratization of going stupidly fast, and I think that's beautiful. The small block Chevy isn't just overpowered. It's overpowered in a way that fundamentally changed what we expect from engines. It set a bar so high that 70 years later, manufacturers are still trying to reach it. Most never will. Because how do you beat something that's cheap, simple, reliable, powerful, and supported by literally millions of fanatics? You don't. You just buy a small block and join them. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. Your project car will receive a small block swap. It's not a matter of if, but when. That's not a threat. It's a promise. A promise of accessible, reliable, completely unreasonable power. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Long live the small block. Long live Pushrod V8s. Long live the beautiful absurdity of making way too much power from an engine designed when computers were the size of buildings. Eat it. Progress. We've got pushrods, and we're not afraid to use them.